It isn't rare for an athlete to request a trade. Regardless of the sport, you see this. It happens quite often. Usually, you'll see the organization grant the wish of the player. Rarely will you see the player and the team work out their differences and stay together. What's even less common, when a player voices their displeasure and asks to be traded, then just to rescind their trade request. But this is the case for one of the NHL's top breakout players, Jake Debrusk of the Boston Bruins. From requesting a trade to nearly being a point-per-game player within a year is an unbelievable story on its own. It just adds context to what a tremendous season he's having. Jake Debrusk, before his injury, was right up there with the franchise names in the scoring race. You've got to go way back to the start of his career to truly get the full picture and provide the context that this story deserves to find out what's behind the breakout season, and you'll see the trend pretty quickly. Debrusk was selected 14th overall by the Bruins in 2015, ahead of the likes of Matthew Barzal, Kyle Connor, Thomas Chabot, and Brock Besser. Through the first handful of years of his NHL career, he did not live up to the hype of being such a high draft selection. And especially with the guys going behind him lighting it up, there was a lot of noise going around Boston and around the name Jake Debrusk, whether he was the right pick or not. It seemed like right after he got drafted is when the problems begun between the two sides. He had a solid start with 40 plus points in both of his first two seasons and looked to be on the right path of development. There is definitely a huge reason behind Jake Debrusk's success this season, however. Bruce Cassidy is one of the best head coaches in the NHL, and he proved this in his tenure with the Bruins, capturing the Jack Adams Award. Shockingly, after a Game 7 loss to the Hurricanes, Cassidy was relieved of his duties. This was a surprise to the entire hockey world, but a relief to number 74. Cassidy seemed to have an ongoing problem with Debrusk. The two had a back and forth discourse for years. Debrusk was drafted in 2015 and was drafted with the pressure of being a top 15 pick. Bruce Cassidy was hired as the head coach in 2016. From 2020 and into 2021, Jake Debrusk saw a significant decline in his point production. This would lead to him being scratched. The 2021 playoffs, Debrusk ended up being scratched from a game against the New York Islanders. Cassidy would then call out Debrusk, saying that the second effort was only there in the player when he was producing. Cassidy then said, if you want to play, you, quote, need to help the team win. November 2021 was when Jake Debrusk officially requested a trade to leave the organization that drafted him. Despite all the controversy, Jake Debrusk still managed to put up a great season last year. Nothing like what he's been able to do this year, but still respectable considering all that was going on around him. After Bruce Cassidy was fired, Don Sweeney, the general manager, would admit that Cassidy's approach was becoming more negative towards players. This would hint specifically Jake Debrusk. Before the start of the next season, Debrusk rescinded his trade request, after Cassidy had already been fired and picked up by the Vegas Golden Knights. While Jake hasn't said anything since Cassidy has been gone to directly call out his former bench boss, he has admitted that he likes the way things are going now. After rescinding his trade request, you can assume he is finally happy in Boston wearing the black and gold. The firing of Bruce Cassidy was important to this story, but bringing Jim Montgomery in as the new head coach was perfect for Debrusk. He is in the role that many wingers would dream of. Right wing on 2/3 of the perfection line. Obviously, when you play with Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron, it can't be that hard, but Debrusk has excelled in this position, a position that he was given with Bruce Cassidy as the head coach and did not succeed in. So you can tell that he has matured as a player, which also obviously would help a breakout, but something this drastic, I think it has a major connection to coaching. I believe that a lot can be said about the importance of a coach having confidence in a young player. You see it all across sports. Recently, we were treated to seeing the real Cole Caulfield thanks to the freedom allowed by Martin St. Louis. There is another example of that now. Jake Debrusk was in the doghouse, for lack of better term, for seemingly his whole career. He reached the breaking point last season. Being scratched time after time, he finally requested a trade. And now with the coaching change, the confidence that Jim Montgomery has in his winger, and just the different mindset that Jake Debrusk is playing with this season, you can see how good he has been. Before getting injured, he had 30 points in 36 games with 16 goals. 14.1 expected goals, 1.9 goals above expected. 14.7 shooting percentage, which ranked 5th on the Bruins roster. The dramatic turnaround of Jake Debrusk isn't being talked about enough. Perhaps it's overshadowed by how good the Bruins have been. Obviously, when you have superstars like David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy, Patrice Bergeron, and Brad Marchand, there isn't enough credit to go all around. Especially when your head coach has been as good as he is. And currently, I think Montgomery is running away with the Jack Adams Award this year, and what he has done for the entire Bruins organization, I don't believe is being talked about right now. Montgomery deserves a ton of credit, but the Bruins players have really played hard for him, and it's something that you could tell last year, while they were good, maybe Cassidy had simply lost the locker room. Jim Montgomery being given a second chance after an abrupt ending in Dallas, a year in St. Louis as an assistant coach, and now getting hired into one of the best situations in the league, I think he deserves a lot of credit. Not only for the unprecedented success of the Bruins, but for the turnaround of Jake Debrusk, helping to keep a top-line winger in Beantown long-term. I believe Jake Debrusk is finally becoming the player that a lot of people knew he was. And I can't stress this enough, young players, no matter how long they have been in the league actually, I believe that the coaching staff has a responsibility. Players need to be able to be held accountable, but not to the point where they're worried about being scratched or demoted after one or two poor games off a pretty solid streak. That's what Debrusk was dealing with. The turnaround of Boston this year, the turnaround of Jake Debrusk, is something that I think simply is not being talked about enough. It is historic. And if he can continue this pace, the Bruins are going to be able to get the player that they drafted and keep him for a very long time. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye.